Hello, my name is Scott Bradley, and this is the Gersnet Podcast. And as always, this episode is brought to you by Forrest Precision Engineering. And I'm delighted to be joined by the one and only Stewart Weir. Stewart, how are we?
Let's have a go at unmuting myself again. I've got about 15 buttons on this screen here, all either say mute or unmute. And I tend to pick the wrong one, but as us, we're good for a go. Yes, all good.
Fantastic. You miss me?
Yeah, absolutely. I've in my lifetime, I've had meningitis, and I've broke my collarbone twice, and in both instances, it was more pleasant than having to put up with you on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. So anyway, at least I've managed to survive. No speaking to you, or no listening to you. So let's start a new season the way we intend to proceed.
That's it, Stuart. But we'll just dive right into it. We've got a lot to talk about, right? And obviously, you haven't been on the show in a while, and I'm very keen to get your thoughts on obviously the appointment of Russell Martin, right? And I think a lot of people want to know your thoughts on it as well, because Stuart, as we all know, you're a very old school guy, right? And I can imagine when the appointment of Russell Martin was announced, I think you're probably a bit underwhelmed by it. But tell me, what was your thoughts when it was announced that Russell Martin was the new Rangers manager?
I've not been on for a while. Put this way, I thought I was coming on here to speak about Pedro Caixinha. So that's how long it's been since I was on. No, I think there was a level of how can I put it? I wasn't underwhelmed. I just thought that this looked a bit like almost like a project, the very thing that Rangers were trying to steer people away from thinking. It just looked as if this was going to be a project and with all projects, what you get is a period of time to make it come good. And I have to say, Russell Martin's come in. I think one or two of his decisions and one or two of his ideas have maybe taken a wee bit longer than what even he expected to drip through to some of the players. But I have to say that in terms of midweek, if that is the way he intends to play, and he's got a team that intends to play, to instruction of how he wants it, it could be quite good times at Rangers. The jury, the Gordon jury, that is, could be out for a wee while yet. One game doesn't make a season. You're looking for consistency. You're looking for a number of performances like that. But I have to say that there was a lot to be optimistic about after the midweek game.
Yeah, but obviously in terms of like the managerial appointment, right? Who did you originally want in? Because I remember during that spell where it was like all sorts of names are getting plucked out the blue, where it was like Steven Gerrard, Davide Ancelotti, obviously that the former Ajax manager. It was all over the place. It was almost like the media were just making it up as they were going along. But was there one manager in particular during that period that you actually wanted in?
I thought if Ancelotti had been available, he'd have been a good shout. Actually, I thought there was just something about him. But I hark back to the last appointment under or Philippe Clement, when Graham Souness said that Frank Lampard should have got the job. And you look at the end of last season, Coventry City were going quite well, and you're thinking, well, maybe Souness was right. I have to say, a lot of this was down to the kind of shop that Rangers were shopping in when it came to make a new appointment. Gone were the days when Walter Smith went and Dick Advocat came in. That's long gone. And nowadays you tend to have a manager. You need to have two things. One, you run a risk if you give somebody who's no experience the job, because you could be out of the running after about maybe 8 weeks or 10 weeks. And I think Rangers have had enough moments like that in the last several years. So I think the experience-wise, I think that's why Russell Martin looked good. There was a lot said about him. When you have him being mentioned, and the fact that you have Patrick Stewart coming out and saying he was the outstanding candidate. Well, that's you started jumping up and down in the trapdoor as well if it all goes horribly wrong. You're the guy that's appointed him. So I think all in all, I'm always wary of managers nowadays, it almost looks as if it's the guy that comes in with the best PowerPoint presentation that seems to have more people listening to him. But Russell Martin has done well at various clubs in the past. I think the whole Southampton fiasco was one where I think his stubbornness maybe meant it wasn't going to change for anybody, and lo and behold, it didn't do Southampton or him much good. So maybe he's learned from that. And again, all managers need to learn at some point in time, and maybe even learn the hard way. So this is his gig. This is his team. He can put his stamp on it, put his mark on it. He appears to be getting the support from on high at Rangers. And I will say again, whilst there were various names and various candidates banded about, there was nobody there that I could see who was so outstanding that I was going to take a tenner out of my pocket and go to the bookies and put money on them. You start seeing different names banded about, or maybe Sean Dyche could come in because of the Everton connection. Maybe he could come in. You think to yourself, no, Rangers are maybe they've struggled in recent times, but they're beyond making that kind of appointment. All in all, I think we wait and see. As I say, it's still very, very early days. And, I think a lot of people, when you were mentioning Steven Gerrard there, I think a lot of people forget how long it took Steven Gerrard to actually start getting things going in his direction in terms of winning a title, in terms of, making it his team and making Rangers turn them from outsiders to challengers and then into winners. So we'll see how it goes with Russell Martin.
Yeah, no, 100%. No, like, because see, when we first appointed Russell Martin, I was very underwhelmed by it because I was like, what are we doing here? Because I was so against it in the sense of like, right, we've seen what he done at Southampton, obviously just judging it just purely on what he done in the Premier League, right? But as you said, you mentioned about how stubborn he was. But then I thought about it, done more research, and I was like, you know what? He deserves a chance. I watched quite a lot of interviews with him. He comes across as a very likable, honest guy, and we'll touch on that later on in the podcast, where he says how it is. He's not like one of those guys like Michael Beale, like who's I'll say it like he's not like a used car salesman, shall we say? But Martin has came across really well so far, and I want to ask you about this, Stuart. The signings he's made so far, that's like it's gave me a lot of optimism going forward because Rothwell looks like a player, Gassama looks like a player, the boy Asgard looks like a player as well. Obviously, we haven't seen him yet, but obviously just going by obviously what he's done in England and whatnot, the signings he's made, they look like they could be the real deal. So I've not got an issue whatsoever with Martin, like bringing a lot of these players like from England up to Scotland. I've no problem with that. But in terms of the signings he's made so far, what do you make of it?
I think, when a manager's in a job, he works 24/7. When a manager's out of a job, he takes a week off and then starts working 24/7 again. So he'll have been monitoring players, whether it was Rangers, Wigan, Fenerbahce, whoever came in for him to give him his next gig, he'd have been monitoring players and keeping an eye on players and knowing what the movements of certain players are. And I think what you've seen here are guys that are coming to Rangers are maybe not the top level that if he'd still been Southampton, they might be bringing in, but maybe the next level down, which is more than sufficient for Rangers. And he's also able to give people an opportunity of playing a European football, which they wouldn't have done had they been playing in Championship in England or elsewhere. So I think the signings he's brought in, they've been encouraging. And I say that again with only a matter of a couple of games in the clock for some of these guys. But compared to some of the, I use the word advisedly, desperate signings that Rangers have made over a period of time. If you go back to Rangers winning or getting promoted back into the top flight and some of the jokers that actually appeared then at Rangers, you start to think to yourself, well, you don't want to be blowing money, bringing guys in who have maybe got 18 months left of a career, never mind of a contract. And I think the guys that he's coming in are all of an age where if they play for Rangers for 3 years or 4 years, and Rangers get a turn out of them over that period and are able then to resell them on for something, likewise or something better, then I think that's job done. I have to say I'm encouraged with the players that have come in. They all look as if they can actually play the game. But the big thing I would say is, unlike last season, and unlike during the summer, Scott, where what you were actually looking at is the ethos and the style that Russell Martin wanted to play, and then you looked at the players that Rangers had, none of them really, well, maybe one or two fitted. There was a great many guys there who were never going to buy into this, which maybe we saw against Motherwell last week. But there's a lot of guys who weren't going to buy into this, weren't going to be capable of buying into this. And the guys that he's introduced are obviously people that fit his model rather than what was already at Ibrox. So there's a real change to this team. There's still some of the faces there that belong to the previous regime, the previous era. But I think there's a lot more that are obviously footballers that Russell Martin likes. And that is the main thing, that he thinks he can get a tune out of these guys, hence the reason why they've made the move to Ibrox.
And I just want to touch on Martin's post-match comments from the draw against Motherwell at the weekend, right? He didn't hold back, Stuart. I was really surprised about how scathing he was. And a lot of people thought it was very bold and very risky what he said after the game. But obviously some of the comments were very lucky to get a point. He was spot on in that. And then he also said some of our players need to drop their ego. Too many out there are protecting themselves. And obviously you've seen that in Tuesday where he dropped some big names. He dropped James Tavernier, he dropped Nico Raskin, Kieran Dowell, Danilo. But what did you make of his post-match comments? Did you like that? The fact he just right away from the get-go was like, didn't hold back, especially this early on in his Rangers managerial career?
I'm surprised tonight you haven't edged your screen in black and are wearing maybe a funereal suit because Tavernier was dropped. But the thing with that is you're either trying to engender some kind of urgency within the players, or you're just going out on a limb and they're not going to follow you. And I think what he did was he gave one or two the frighteners, and he also backed it up. I think he showed the balls that he has that Philippe Clement didn't have. Philippe Clement kept picking the same guys over and over again, hoping that eventually things would turn. And I think he's looked at that 90 minutes, has said, we were in charge of that game, we should have won that game, we were lucky, we sat back, we stood off when we should still have been pressing. I don't care how tired you are, I don't care what stage of the season it is, this is how you play the game. And I think he basically went for it. And that's a very, very brave move, because if it doesn't work for you, you've lost some of the players because they just won't back you. People forget, however, that a Rangers manager being public in his criticism is nothing new. Others have done it. I think there's more focus and spotlight on Russell Martin doing it this time because maybe we haven't heard that from a Rangers manager for so long. You remember, I remember anyway, very early on in his Rangers career, Andy Gorham being, slated by Walter Smith over a goal he lost that cost Rangers a game against Hearts. And Walter Smith said publicly he needs to remember he's playing for Rangers now. In private, he said, you need to remember you're not playing for Hibs anymore. But he was emphasising that it was a different level, a different standard. There were more people watching what he did as a Rangers player then. And the message get through to the goalkeeper. He quickly took that on board. So Walter Smith was quite subtle in that. But again, he was going out and basically saying, I'm picking you, I've bought you, you're in my signings. I'm expecting a certain standard from you. And I think it's not, it wasn't any surprise to me. The guys that were dropped for the European game in midweek, you could have, if he was going to make changes, they were like, two of those guys were a banker for being dropped. One was Tavernier, and the other was Dowell. because the Motherwell equaliser came by neither of them doing their job and looking as if they were running in cement. And I think at that point in time, he's looked at it and said, "Well, these guys ain't going to cost me my job. I'll make bold decisions," and it paid off for him in midweek.
And obviously, the team was leaked before kickoff. I think you probably seen that on social media, right? And Barry Ferguson actually came out, I think yesterday actually, and he said that he warned Russell Martin that there's a mole in the dressing room in terms of leaking the team. And we don't know who that is, right? It would be wrong for us to actually say who it would be, right? But that is quite a concern, the fact that Ferguson, obviously, he knows there's a mole, but he can't exactly come out and say it, but they've got that kind of suspicion there. So it just makes you think, though, like, how long has that been going on in that Rangers dressing room where there has been that kind of, that there's been that mole there, it's been leaking that kind of information out, Stuart?
I think it's been there for a while, simply because some of the players thought they were bigger than the manager. Very, very obvious, I would say. I think some guys thought in that dressing room they were untouchable. I think there's some guys in that dressing room that have been the issue and the problem with Rangers for a considerable period of time. And Russell Martin said, "Oh, I'm not bothered." Might I suggest he's not bothered simply because he knows who it is, and he also knows what the shelf life is at Ibrox.
Hmm. And I was saying this to one of my friends during the week, right?
You have friends?
Yes, I do, believe it or not, Stuart. Believe it or not, I do have friends. Believe it or not. But I was saying this to one of my pals during the week. See Nico Raskin, I don't know about you, but I feel like it's very early on in the season, right? But I'm getting the impression, Stuart, that he's checked out. That's the impression I'm getting. It's almost like he's got his eyes set elsewhere.
Yeah,
Right?
I think there's the head.
Yeah.
I think the head has been turned because I think he's gone from domestic football with Rangers, who have not been very successful, to suddenly playing international football with Belgium and playing alongside, um, various players who are playing at a much higher standard and looking as good as they are.
Got to his
And
head as well, yeah.
yeah, and I think, listen, I'm not saying that he's a bad egg or he's being negative or whatever it is. He might be thinking, I can play at a certain standard. That's the standard I want to play at. If I'm in the Belgian international team and I'm holding my own and people are talking about me, I must be quite good. So what am I doing at Rangers? Not actually understanding that people will look at you and say, well, you might have just had a good game there with Belgium, but you actually need to do it week in, week out. So you'll still need to come back to Rangers and prove yourself. Listen, I think the boy's talented. I think he's got a great future ahead of him. I do think that on occasions he's another one who maybe thinks he's done it all and seen it all, but he's got much to learn. Well, exactly. He's got much to learn on that front. But then the psychology of footballers is that they only have a couple of games, and some of them think they're absolute world beaters. Mm-hmm. And again, it's sometimes the lesson learned is when you come back and you're dropped for a game against Motherwell or Dundee or Falkirk, whoever it might be, just to prove a point. If you've been in this game long, as long as I have, and watched as many games as I have, you'll see players and no players. I could name half a dozen players within Rangers over the past 30 years, 40 years, who you would have said were stars in the making, who thought they made it, but they made it too soon, and they were quickly dropped. I won't mention names to cause any kind of embarrassment, but you might know some or have seen some, and the fact is, these guys think they're suddenly Billy Big Bollocks because they're travelling in the same car as a couple of first team players and they're training with the first team and they're in the first team squad and all the rest of it. And as you say, they've done absolutely nothing. The starting point with this entire Rangers squad is you have done nothing.
Mm. And also, just continuing on with Raskin, right? Also, we know he's a very talented player, as we've said. He is, like, we know the talent's there. He's a very good player, right? In the last 6 months, he's arguably been Rangers' best player, right? But He's got 2 years left in his deal, right? His stock is high. It's very high right now. But see if he doesn't sign a new deal before the window shuts. I think we should. I think we need to sell him, Stuart. We do because we can't go down the pathway of what happened before. Because our player trade model is abysmal. Just look at like I hate saying it, but Celtic's player trade model is fantastic. It really is. When you look at our one, it's shocking. Two examples: Morelos and Kent. We let them go for nothing. They should have went for at least 15, 20 million pounds or whatever, right? So if you're in charge of Rangers right now, Stuart, if Raskin does not sign a new deal, are you cashing in on him if you get an offer?
Right at this minute, well, you run the risk then if you go through this transfer window, he doesn't sign a new deal, and you end up with a guy for 6 months who basically just treads water and does nothing. So he's devalued almost immediately.
Yep.
So me, I would be hawking him around just now, saying how much can we get for this guy, and putting a lot of trust into Russell Martin and his scouting staff by saying there have to be other guys out there in European football or guys who can see Rangers through the next 2 years. I'm not saying they need to turn up guys aged 19 or 20 or 21. It can be a couple of guys aged 27, 28. Russell Martin ain't going to get 3 years at this to try and make a success. Nobody on high at Rangers will have that kind of loyalty. He'll either do it in the first year, 18 months, or he won't be there. That's how the American model works right across sport. So he knows he needs to get it done. He'll identify players that are out there who can do him a turn, do Rangers a turn, and probably do themselves a turn at the same time. And if there's money out there to be had from Raskin or any Rangers player, I would say just now, then they'll be gone. Because you could probably bring in 2 players or maybe even 3 players on what you might get for Raskin. Listen, saying he's worth 25, 30 million, he's not worth 25 or 30 million. If Rangers get something, and I've said it before, Rangers get any kind of deal just now where it's north of 10 million for any player, then you take it, you bite somebody's hand off and you take the cash and you invest that back in the team, because as it stands just now, Rangers still need players in key positions.
And so, see, obviously, you mentioned about Rangers still need to bring in maybe a few more signings. What areas do you think they really need to strengthen in?
Centre back, left back, and I honestly say striker, because even though these guys run nice shapes and nice, I'll put my hands up. I have been overly critical of Dessers. But Dessers actually looked a decent player in midweek. And why was that? Because he had 2 guys bombing beyond him and getting crosses in. And the guy actually looked as if he needs...
comfortable. He looked very comfortable,
he looked as if he was a striker who could do something for you. The other big thing is, and this might go into something, the mindset of Rangers players just now, and this goes back to the changes that Martin made after Saturday. You have Dessers, who in a penalty shootout against Celtic could not take a penalty. Suddenly, picking the ball up and putting it in the spot in a European tie when there is so much riding on it and converting a penalty. What has changed his mind? Is he suddenly thinking, I better contribute here or I'm not going to be here much longer? Or I better contribute if I want to get a move? Whatever it is, it's changed for the better. But I still think that Rangers need a striker. And listen, you just look at English football, coming across strikers that can put the ball in the net time and time and time again. There's not many out there, and if there are those who are quite successful in front of goals, they're going to cost you fortunes. The fact of the matter is that Rangers have fortunes to spend, but they could unearth somebody, they could bring somebody in who will score goals at a particular level. And I still think Rangers need somebody like that, rather than chopping and changing who's going to get the number 9 shirt. Well, the lead striker's role. Any one of three, pair them all three, any one of three. In fact, you can stick to three of them on sometimes and win with guaranteed a goal. So that's the area I think is of concern. Left side, left back, Jeffy played there the other night there, and he did a job. The team looked much more balanced than it had done when Aaron's were playing there. Aaron's is a right-sided player, so everything that goes down the left, he has to cut back in on his right foot. It makes it two things. It makes it easy to shut him down and mark him out the game because you know you can turn him back inside. He's not got to beat you outside. And the other thing is, it slows everything else up for all the players that are maybe running beyond him. I think if you look at the makeup of the Rangers team on Wednesday, whilst there were still a few deficiencies, the fact that you have two fullbacks who are actually on their natural sides that can actually go forward and bomb forward and join in with the wingers that you've got actually makes it a far more balanced team and a far more balanced setup. I thought the previous European tie last week,
Panathinaikos.
I thought the fullbacks were playing so narrow. They ended up like midfielders. And what actually happened was they started cutting down the space in the midfield, especially for somebody like Rothwell. Rothwell's the kind of guy, I think, who likes to get a bit of space and either run sideways or dominate a central area. He wasn't getting that space when Tavernier and Aarons were basically, he was bumping into them every time he turned. And the central defenders, I think he operates better in more space. And I think that comes by having more of a balance with the guys who are either playing on the corners of the defence and also the fact they play with two wingers.
And I just want to touch on this as well, Stuart. Also, the goalkeeping situation. Obviously, Jack Butland in the last few games, I would probably say, has been, with the exception of Gassama, he's been Rangers' best player. Like, Rangers would not be in the Champions League right now if it wasn't for Jack Butland. But with the goalkeeping situation, right, obviously, if you said to me at the start of June, I would have been like, get a new goalkeeper in. But now I'm like, I feel like Jack Butland is, I don't know what it is, but since Martins came in, it's like he's went back to his old self, which is a good thing. But obviously, this season, do you think Butland can actually kick on and get back to what he was like back in 2023?
To quote the late great Andy Gorham, you're only as good as your last fuck up. And every goalkeeper runs that risk. I think there were two things last season. I think Butland was a bit underwhelmed at what was going on around him. And also he became a dad. And and any introduction of a child into anybody's life can cause a bit of trauma behind the scenes. And you just wonder, how much that might have involved his process of getting ready for games and getting, into the kind of zone for games. Anyway, whatever it is, he's come back during the pre-season. And again, he might be in goal. You don't know these things unless you speak to the players. But he might be thinking, here's a guy as a manager who I really want to play for. I want to show this guy my best because this guy's coming in. And to be honest, he has got a wish list. If he wants to sign players, it looks as if he can go out and bring players in from here, there, and everywhere. One of them might be a goalkeeper. I quite like being at Rangers. I quite like earning the money I'm earning at Rangers. I don't want to go anywhere else just now. I better buckle down and start turning in for some performances. And he does look a player that's somewhere back to his best, maybe of, I would say, a year or 18 months ago.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%, yeah. Because it was the last few games, Butland's been phenomenal, and obviously I think he would have been buzzing obviously on Tuesday night, but he had like nothing to do. It was like he had obviously nothing to do on Tuesday night, which was ideal. But in terms of the performance on Tuesday night, Stuart, I thought it was fantastic. It was I don't want to try and sound like hyperbolic here, but I thought it was a 10 out of 10 performance. I was so impressed with it because obviously with Martin's style of play, it's divided opinion, and but we've seen glimpses of how good it can be. But on Tuesday night, I thought me seeing how good it actually can be, and I was really impressed. But what was your thoughts?
I thought it was a kind of performance that you might have expected from a team that was, the manager was so critical on the Saturday. I thought, you're back to last Saturday against Motherwell, Rangers played pretty well up until they started making the substitutions. And when they made the substitutions, they went back to what they were doing under Clement. And they went back to guys who just were not trying to play the style or the system or the ethos that Martin has. And I think at that point, that's why he was, he came out and he said what he was going to say. I think with the changes that he made, you saw a greater urgency from the Rangers team, both going forward, but also going back away. I have to say there were two guys. I mean, there were a lot of guys that were probably in line for the player in the match. In midweek. And everybody would have their say. I mean, you might say Butland, the two wingers would certainly come into that category. Rothwell had a good game. The two guys I thought who did a particularly good job in difficult circumstances, because we were up against some guys that could actually play, would have been Diamandi and Cameron. Cameron would have been my player of the match. And here is something for everybody who thinks you need to be signing guys with foreign names or bringing them up from England and all the rest of it. Rangers have lost their way in identifying Scottish talent over a number of years. Maybe it's because the managers don't fancy them. Maybe it's because certain scouts don't fancy them. I don't exactly know. But Rangers, there were a time 30 years ago where Rangers had to sign Scottish players because of European rules. And Rangers have always had really, really good Scottish players playing in the team. And I don't know why I've taken an eye off that particular ball, because there's other players out there that would have done a really good job for Rangers. There's some boy, what was his name? Ferguson out in Italy just now. Seems to be doing quite a good job.
He's doing all right for himself.
He's done all right. Hamilton Ashley's, he could have gone anywhere. He went to Aberdeen. He then went abroad. There's a whole load of different tales. Well, because his dad, he didn't go to Rangers because of this. Because his dad, he didn't go to Rangers because they remember what he was like. His dad was like when he was at Ibrox. All these kind of different things. The fact of the matter is, Rangers scouting locally have been abysmal, absolutely abysmal, and there's still Scottish players playing within the Scottish game who would do Rangers a turn. I always remember speaking to Graham Souness about all the different signings he'd made and how much money he'd spent here, there, and everywhere, and it went on into Walter Smith's regime as well. One guy whose name kept coming up time and time again was John Brown. 350 grand from Dundee, when Hearts were going to sign him and said, no, I'm not going to sign you because your knees are shot. Well, that just proves the fact that people can get it wrong. And again, you can list a whole bunch of different guys that have come from Scottish clubs, like Kenny Miller, and through different generations. And I just think the Rangers should sharpen their act up a wee bit. And there's guys like Cameron kicking around in Scottish football who can do a turn. And I'm not saying it after one match, but he certainly looked more comfortable than some so-called bigger name players have done over a number of years. If he can come in and Scottish players can come in, that can only be good for Scottish football as well. Because then what you start to do is you start to get young kids, boys, having the ambition of wanting to play for Rangers and knowing they might get a chance, whereas they've gone all through these academies and different age levels, got to the end and never get a chance to play because they brought some unknown in from Barnsley.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, you made a good point there, Stuart. Obviously, talking about like bringing for the youth, especially Scottish players, right? And you mentioned Clement earlier on. Clement, one of the first things that he mentioned, right, when he came in to Rangers was, I'm going to bring through the youth, right? The only youth player that I actually give a chance to, let's be honest, was Ross McCausland, who is not very good. right? So that was just all hot air. But that's something Rangers have neglected for so long in terms of bringing through young Scottish players through the academy. And there's talent there that it's clear as day. Like, and one boy that I really did feel sorry for was Robbie McCrory, because he got dealt a difficult hand because he's a solid keeper. He's decent. Anytime he played in the Rangers goal, he was solid, but he just never got given that real chance to be the Rangers number one. But yeah, no, yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on in that sense of where like Rangers need to start signing young Scottish footballers, and Lyle Cameron on Tuesday was brilliant. I thought he was just a bag of energy in that midfield. You can tell he would give anything for the jersey. I thought I was so impressed with him. So impressed with him.
The other thing is, you've got an academy there, and if you look at it over the piece, people will say, well, you know, if you pick out the players who come through academy football at Rangers and actually developed into something, Rangers have sold most of them. They've never had a chance to really establish themselves at Rangers. You look at Gilmore, you look at
500,000, you pick a ball for us.
So,
aye.
Exactly. They've come through. People have gone, oh, he's good. Rangers are skint. Let's buy that player for X number of pounds, and Rangers have sold them. Now, perhaps, and this goes back to the kind of model that American sport has. You look at the youth that you generate and you try and make something of them. You don't basically allow them to just fritter them away and allow them to go elsewhere and develop careers. You see how good they are to start with. And if that means players going out on loan, but going out on loan to bigger clubs or in different environments, then that's what you do. You don't just stock them up and store them and put them in a fridge and say, well, we'll go back to you at some point in time. Oh, wait a minute, we've had an offer from Kilmarnock, or this boy is attracting a lot of attention. We'll sell him for 5 million quid or 10 million quid after half a dozen games. You need to have an end product. If it's just cash you're doing it for, fine. Tell everybody that's what the model is, and you're not going to develop any players other than to sell them. But you need to be bringing players through that you can make a core of a squad around. And I think that's been badly lacking at Rangers for whatever reason over a number of years. There's a huge chance when Rangers were demoted into the fourth tier of Scottish football, they hadn't even a chance to actually try some youngsters, and they never did it. They were so busy and so desperate to get back up the way, rather than giving some of the product that they actually had then a chance or an opportunity at a certain level. Okay, some did get a chance. They were found wanting, they weren't good enough, they've gone elsewhere. That's fine. But you need to persist or persevere with some of these kids. And they're never always going to come good right at the start. You sometimes need to give them, more than 3 games or 4 League Cup ties. You sometimes maybe need to play them for half a season. But I will digress into something else about basically the Mickey Mouse League that Rangers play in. If you're going to develop youngsters, you need a bigger league, because you need to take a risk out of, not just Rangers, but you need to take a risk out of teams getting into relegation dogfights and all the rest of it, and make it easier for teams to play football rather than every point that they get being a prisoner.
No, 100%. But in terms of the players that need to leave, Stuart, obviously we know like Rangers need to sell quite a lot.
Here we go.
It's a big list. But really, obviously we know, right, not all of them will be going, because, like, for example, see Matondo, he's one that stands out, right? We all want him to go, but he's going to probably be staying purely because he's earning good money, and if he goes elsewhere, he's not going to be earning the same amount, right? But realistically, right, what players do you think Rangers can get off the books this window?
Well, actually, I go back to the point I made earlier. You have 3 strikers, okay? Rangers will never play all 3 at the same time. So you need to decide how you're going to pair those 1 out of 3, as it'll never be all 3. Do you let one of them go, 2 of them go? Do you bring somebody else in? I think it's, to be honest, I think at this moment in time, that position in particular, it's all about lining up your ducks. It's known that some guy's going to get out the door and you've got to get X number of pounds for him, and you've got another guy coming back through or another player coming back through who's going to replace them. So much of this transfer window, or what's remaining in this transfer window, is down to timing. I would have to say some of the players that are on the books there, they don't want to go because they're making big money. Here you go. Here's the fait accompli. We'll give you this. You leave. If you don't take it, you can sit and go and play benefit games in Auchtermuchty or Fraserburgh or whatever it is for the rest of your time at Ibrox, because you ain't getting anywhere near this first team. And at the end of it, let's see how good let's see who wants you at the end of 18 months if you've not played a first team game in that time.
Because see out of the three strikers, I think you'll probably agree with this. But I think we all know if I have to make a prediction, I think it'll be Igaman that will be off. It does seem like that. It does seem like that, which is a shame because Igaman has got huge potential. Like obviously last season was his first season playing professional football, right? And he scored 16 goals. And you can tell he's raw, but he's got some serious talent there. So in terms of his development, it would just benefit him staying for another season, but he will be off. And when you look at Dessers, right? Dessers has been great the last 6 months, right? And he's finally won me over because I've been so hot and cold with him. But Dessers will not want to be a number two. Like I think he's made that very clear. If he's going to be a number two, he's going to want to move. So, and when you look at Danilo, I don't think Danilo's a bad player by any means, but he's been a flop. If I've been totally honest about it, Stuart, he's been a flop. So he has. But out of all the three strikers, if I had to pick one guy to be the number one, I would actually probably say Dessers. If I'm being totally honest, and as you said, the fact that he's got two pacey wingers alongside him with Antman and Kasama, who knows? We might even see Dessers get better this season.
Yeah, I mean, listen. People will say, "Well, that's not what you were saying 6 months ago." I've not really changed my tune. For me, there's a big thing about strikers, right? And it's lies, damn lies, and statistics. People will say, "Look at all the goals he scores," right? A striker is not always about all the goals they score. Two things. First is who they score them against, and secondly, when they score them. So, you look at some of the goals that he scored, right? He scored, Rangers have only drawn a game. Well, actually, if he'd scored the chances that he got, Rangers would have won the game 3-1 as opposed to just drawing one each. So it's no volume that matters. But then again, the rest of the team defensively, they need to be doing a job as well. But the fact is that you look at a striker or look at strikers who each and every one of them has a quality. There's positives about each of them, but there's also negatives. And it's about trying to strike some sort of balance where you end up with 2 out of 3 isn't bad, but you need to let one of them go. I think you're right about who might be first out the door, because he might get a value. But then again, if Dessers suddenly scores 5 goals between now and the end of August, he's going to be worth something to somebody, because he's scoring goals and he's attracting more attention because of the goals he's scoring. It's a difficult balance in that. I would much prefer, and I say this because of what I've seen in the past, I would much prefer Rangers to be in a position where they go out and they sign another striker, and then they can make up their mind who they want to leave, rather than somebody leaving and then running about in a panic with their hair on fire, trying to bring somebody in.
But just to put you in the spot, Stuart, is there any striker out there realistically that you would like to see Rangers bring in? Or just put you in the spot here?
I think. Oh, let me duck that one effectively. Yeah, there's a number of strikers who could do a job for Rangers. In fact, Rangers have actually played against 2 teams in Europe in the last couple of weeks, and they've got guys that you would say actually they could actually look quite good playing for Rangers. I think the thing with that is all down to the finance. Everybody was told, well, Russell Martin's got a war chest, these new guys are coming in, they're going to spend this. The one thing that would cement those claims and make a statement as if they went out and signed a striker who was actually somebody who's worth about, 10 million quid. Is that going to happen? I don't think it will happen, no, unless they sell a couple of players. So that again, this is down to the market forces. Who can Rangers afford that's going to be better than what they've got, and who can Rangers afford that's not going to be attracting the attention of other teams? There are a couple of guys in Holland who seem to have been scoring goals for fun. There's always a couple of guys in France who seem to score goals at a remarkable rate of knots. But it's whether they want to move or whether they need earmarked for something bigger. Because again, French clubs are not going to take 5 million, 6 million, 7 million from Rangers when they know that there's an Italian club waiting around the corner for the last 2 days of the transfer window, and they're going to give them double that.
And just touching on the game on Tuesday, Stuart. See, obviously, as Rangers fans, especially me probably, we tend to get too excited about new signings when they hit the ground running. But I think we can all confidently say, right, that Gassama is going to be the real deal for Rangers. Yeah, like 4 goals in 4 games. And I've spoken to a lot of Sheffield Wednesday fans, and they've said that as well. Like they're raging the fact that we got him for so on the cheap. We got him so cheaply, right? Because they were saying like he's well worth like 10 plus million. But the fact we got him so cheap is because obviously they're in a bad financial situation. But Gassama though, do you think we'll be able to keep him to the end of the season? Because if he keeps doing what he's doing, he might be off.
Well, I think they will. But the thing there with what you've just said, though, Scott, is Rangers spent money bringing this guy in. How many players have Rangers had in the last several 10 dozen years that they've brought in loan and then had to go out and sign them again? If you look at Kent was at Ibrox on loan, and then Rangers went and spent 7 million quid on him. Now, 7 million would buy a championship player, so maybe Rangers played slightly above the odds bringing him to Ibrox. But the fact of the matter is that he was a good player who just for whatever reason just decided that he was maybe better than they ever thought he was, and I think that's why you see him where he is now.
Yeah.
But in terms of Gassama, I think that's somebody who's obviously, again, this goes back to the Russell Martin connections. He has seen him play, or he said somebody watch him when he's been playing for Sheffield Wednesday. And again, a bit like any club with financial difficulties, it's your best players that go on the cheap. And I think Rangers are want to watch it and make that signing. And the other thing I would say is the fact that Rangers went out and said, how much do you want? Well, we'll take this for him. There you are. There it is. None of your can we put up in installments? Can we get him in loan for 6 months? Can we see how it turns out and all the rest of it? Go and sign him. That's the kind of player we want. That's the kind of player who could do a job for us. That's the kind of player who's going to be a success at Rangers. He's been identified for that. He's a Rangers player. And if somebody does come in after a year, the profit will be a hell of a lot more than the 2.172 million that they actually spent on him. It'll be six times that anyway, 5-6 times that anyway, easily, if he continues along the same flight path. But then again, if you're watching that every week and he's scoring that many goals and doing that what he's doing for Rangers, you wouldn't want him to leave.
Yeah, no, 100% sure. And obviously, just to finish off, we've got Dundee tomorrow, and we're coming up against Stephen Presley. And obviously, there's been a lot made about Stephen Presley's appointment as Dundee manager. I think we all know why he got the job is because he's good pals with old Gordon. And I think this would be a great test for Russell Martin in the sense of like you're coming off a fantastic result during the week where your style of play was in full flow, and you're coming up against Dundee, who are, let's be honest, I don't want to sound hyperbolic here saying this, but they're a mess under Stephen Presley, and they're going to go down if they don't get rid of him. But in terms of tomorrow, sure, do you think you'll make a lot of changes going at the game tomorrow?
No, to be honest, I'll go back again to last Saturday. I thought Russell Martin made unnecessary changes against Motherwell. I don't want to keep quoting Walter Smith, but Walter Smith was the most pragmatist you would ever meet. But one of the things he would say to you when you were, doing pre-season, Choco doing pre-season training, or away on a European trip, or even sitting down at Largs or wherever it was, one thing you would hear him saying is, if somebody would say, "Oh, you're resting this player, are you doing this?" No, you win the game that's in front of you. There's no point in thinking about the next game when you've not won the game that's in front of you. And I think Russell Martin took his eye off the ball a wee bit against Motherwell, and basically thought, well, we'll make a couple of changes, we'll try and hang out for a win here. One of the reasons that Rangers were lucky to get away with a draw is because of the changes that Russell Martin made. He should have won that game and made sure he won that game first and foremost before worrying about the European tie. So I think tomorrow it'll be the same again. Rangers are in a comfortable position. How many times have Rangers had lucky draws in Europe over the years? And beating teams that are much better than them. And that's just a luck of the draw, isn't it? They don't do anything to justify it at their performance levels. It's just a lucky draw they get time and time again. Or is that just somebody else has been telling me that? Anyway, I think tomorrow Rangers go for it, and you go out there and you get your 3 points. Dundee are in a situation where they've only played, one match, and it's going to be fixed bayonets. It's going to be like trench warfare against Dundee from here on in, because there's fright in the eyes of some of the players. There's panic in the hearts of the fans as well, because they don't really like what they're seeing. So this is going to be another tough one for Dundee. It'll be 2 banks of, or I'm going to say 2 banks of 4, maybe 2 banks of 5 that Rangers face, and they'll just try and counter Rangers tomorrow. So same again. You'll need to be on your A game, because you can't allow any slips and then be chasing games. And it's a game where, again, I always say if you win 1-0 and take 3 points, it's not a bad place to be. And you would almost take that against Dundee, because you're never quite sure how difficult they'll make it.
Yeah, because I do believe Rangers, in my opinion, Rangers need to batter Dundee tomorrow, because obviously Dundee fans are not a fan of Stephen Presley, and Dundee, even when they started off their League Cup campaign, they were shambolic. They lost to Airdrie, I think they lost to Alloa as well. So I'm expecting it's an interesting test, purely because, as you said, Dundee will be sitting obviously 10 men behind the ball. The low block will be something else. So it will be interesting to see how Rangers will be able to adapt to that. But I'm going to be very confident. I'm going to say, do you know what? I'm going to say a comfortable 4-0 Rangers victory, Stuart. And obviously we'll finish off there. And on Sunday, Craig and Alan will be on the show, and hopefully they will be discussing a fantastic Rangers 4-0 victory. But Stuart, thank you very much for coming on, mate. I really enjoyed it.
Yes, I like to see your beard nicely trimmed there. I think a great many people are making comments that you're looking very good, very refreshed after the summer. So keep up the good work.
Fantastic, Stuart. I'm glad to hear that. I'll need to check them out. But guys, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, take care and we'll see you soon.